In this video, you'll learn about indirect object pronouns. First of all, indirect objects answer the question to whom or for whom in a sentence. So if you look at this sentence, I bought the book for my sister, we have to ask ourselves two questions. The first is, what did I buy? The answer is the book. The book is the direct object. Now we ask the question, to whom or for whom did I buy it? And the answer is my sister. That makes my sister the indirect object. Now let's look at this sentence. She gave the candy to me. So the first question we need to ask is, what did she give? The candy. So the candy is the direct object. And then we need to answer the question, whom did she give the candy to? And the answer is me. That makes me the indirect object. So the thing that's given is the direct object, and the person receiving it is the indirect object. Ahora te toca a ti. Choose the indirect object in each of these sentences. He bought the gloves for his mom. The indirect object is his mom, because she answers the question, whom did he buy the gloves for? I mailed the socks to you. The indirect object is you, because you are the one that I mailed the socks to. And finally, ella me compró la blusa a mí. The answer is me, or yo, because it answers the question, whom did she buy the blouse for? Think you've got it? Here's a little more information. Unlike direct object pronouns, indirect object pronouns do not replace the indirect objects. Instead, they clarify who is the indirect object versus who is the subject. In other words, you need to include the indirect object pronoun every time you have a sentence with an indirect object. The indirect object in Spanish is marked by the personal a. You always need to use an indirect object pronoun, but you don't always need to specify the indirect object. Here's an example. Ella me compró los guantes a mí. That's saying she bought me the gloves for me. We already know that me is referring to I and can't possibly refer to anything else. So the a mí at the end is actually not necessary. Versus, yo le regalé los guantes a mi hermana. The le means to him, to her, or to you formal. So we need that a mi hermana to clarify exactly who is receiving the gloves. But where does it go? The indirect object pronoun comes before the direct object pronoun and before the conjugated verb. So, here are some examples. Yo le compré la chaqueta a mi amiga. You can also put the indirect object, the person that's receiving the action, in front of the sentence. So you could say, a mi amiga, yo le compré la chaqueta. The important thing is that the indirect object pronoun comes directly before the conjugated verb. ¿Tú me la compraste a mí? We have an indirect object pronoun and a direct object pronoun because me is the indirect object because the jacket was bought for me. But since we already mentioned the jacket, we can just use la. And like I said, a mí isn't really necessary because we already know who the indirect object is thanks to the pronoun me. So we can just say, tú me la compraste. This is very important. You can't lay low in Spanish. So if you have a direct object pronoun and your indirect object pronoun is le or les, then you need to change the indirect object pronoun. If we said, I bought it for my brother, and the it happened to be singular and masculine, it would be yo le lo compré, but that can't exist in Spanish. So we change the le or the les to se. So it's yo se lo compré a mi hermano. That's just the way it is. Alright, so what happens if you want to use an indirect pronoun in a sentence with more than one verb? This is very similar to direct object pronouns and reflexive verbs. If you have a sentence with more than one verb, you can put the indirect object pronoun in one of two places. Either it can go before the conjugated verb, like tú me vas a comprar un coche, or you can tack it onto the end of the infinitive. So tú vas a comprarme un coche. But it has to go in one of those two places. So what happens if you have a sentence with more than one verb, a direct object pronoun, and an indirect object pronoun? The order goes like this. The indirect object pronoun comes before the direct object pronoun, and usually those two come before the conjugated verb. So it's tú me lo vas a comprar, but the other option is to tack them both onto the end of the infinitive. Tú vas a comprármelo. If you do that, you need to put an accent on the third to last syllable. Remember also that if you have le or les next to a direct object pronoun, le or les changes to se. Ahora vamos a practicar. I want you to write the correct indirect object pronoun for each sentence.